Hey, it's Paul Banis of GreatDad.com, and GreatDad.com is a resource for fathers because, as we say, dads don't always think like moms. And today I am talking to Tim Dunn, who lives in Glastonbury, Connecticut. Welcome, Tim.
Hi, Paul. Thanks. It's great to be here. Thank you.
Yeah, Tim has a website and a book out, and I'm really interested in talking to him. You know, now that I'm getting a little bit older and have been doing this a while, it's great to talk to people who are like a generation below me and see how things are changing. And I think the fact that we're seeing more sites with dads talking about what it's like to be a father, how to get things into perspective, tips and tricks is really a good indication that more men are more involved, and some of the loneliness that dads felt a generation ago about being an involved father is kind of disappearing. And one of the things that we're going to talk about during this talk, as we talked about a little bit ago, Tim, is a framework that you have on your site, DadAthlon.com. And there's going to be some of these resources at DadAthlon.com/GreatDad, and we'll put that in the show notes so people can get to that, as well as your book. It's Dad on Purpose.
Yep. Dad on Purpose. Yep. Yeah. The Busy Dad's Playbook for Loving Better, Doing More, and Breathing Easier.
Right. So the two really great resources, and there are going to be some things on that page that you'll get free for tuning in and listening to the podcast today, including a dad quiz to kind of evaluate where you are, and as we said, trying to get back into balance. So first of all, let's just talk about what you've got. You've got 4 kids. Ranging from 12 to 18, boys and girls.
18, you got a lot 12 there. 16-year-old twins and an 18-year-old who's in college. Yeah.
And you've got a full-time job, and you're still motivated to get this information out there. What motivated you to start this and pull it all together?
Yeah, well, honestly, it started with trying to just improve myself, and it's been a complicated couple of years for everybody with everything going on, and found myself at home. And I think a lot of folks, and I was one of you kind of go through the motions, and you wake up, you go to work, get the kids on the bus, go to work, do your thing, come home, drive some people around, have dinner, sit on the couch, fall asleep, maybe upstairs, go to bed, and then repeat. And so much of my life, it was beginning to feel was on autopilot, that I felt like I owed it to myself and owed it to my kids to try to, in order to be the best version of myself and to be the best father, to really investigate that. What can I be doing differently? What am I not doing that I should be doing? What am I doing that I should not be doing? And to sort of catalog that for myself so that I have sort of a to-do list. Because everyone says, I want to do better. But for me, I wanted specifics. What does that look like and where? So that was sort of how the project evolved. I wanted to improve myself. And in the course of doing that, talking with other dads and getting advice, some people said, well, this might be something that, other people might find. If I'm struggling with it, and it's nothing all that special about me, from a father's perspective. I hope my kids think otherwise. But a lot of dads, I think, are probably going through that same thing. I think the issue is, and you touched on it earlier, is I think a lot of dads are doing their thing. And I don't know if it was Thoreau or Emerson, I get confused as to who was whom, but, and just leading lives of quiet desperation, sort of isolated to themselves doing it. And there's no need for that. Let's kind of shake off the shackles and connect with each other, and that's kind of where that project was born.
Yeah, well, quiet lives of quiet desperation, or doing it in their own silo and presenting a aspect of themselves to the world that maybe not is actually in sync with what they're doing on the past. And it is so easy, especially with the economic situation that we've endured for forever, that there's just so much pressure on men, especially to focus on money and career. It's changing, but there used to be not a lot of pressure at all on dads to even show up. And great if your father was somebody who took that on that naturally, but largely men got a pass. And I don't think that's as true for even your generation, 20 years younger than I am.
Yeah, and I think maybe, and I can't speak to what fathers from prior generations, how they would have characterized their perspective on that. But I guess speaking only for myself, I'm not sure I don't want to pass. Like I don't want my only thing to be, here's the check. I'll be, watching the game if you need me, or in the garage, I want to I want to be a model of the man that I want my children to be or to partner with. And I want that to be very intentional, which is different than being effective at it. There's all kinds of mistakes, and just to be very clear at the outset, this book is not written from the perspective of, let me just sit you all down and tell you what the
right.
all. Like, one of the very first things I say early in the book is like, hey, just so you know, I'm a fellow traveler on this journey. And here's a list of like 7 things that I've totally screwed up, in my path of fatherhood. So I just want to make folks perfectly clear that we're together on this, and it's not some sort of guru perspective.
Right.
But you learn from those things. I think that's the issue, is when you make those mistakes, you learn from them. And that's what I've been trying to do for myself. And hopefully I think others maybe find value in that. And the point of the book too is to have concrete things like, hey, here's a list of 7 things you can do, on Saturday with your kid or with your daughter, or, movies you can watch with your son, or, activities you can do, or ways to connect with your wife, or side hustles you can try. I try to keep it very practical and very almost like a reference book in that sense.
Right. Well, the one word you use and it's a theme that comes up in a lot of these conversations is intentionality and having intention, because there's one part of life that is just showing up and like you say, kind of going through the motions, and it's very easy to fall into that trap of letting that happen day after day. And we know, and you and I'm sure have seen many couples and families who kind of fall apart because they are there. They intersect during the day and they say hello, and maybe they, eat a sandwich together every once in a while, but that presence isn't there. And unfortunately, I think that a lot of men need the kind of resource that you have is to remind them about certain things. There are a ton of things that men don't naturally do. A lot of men don't naturally do, not all men, but a lot of men don't naturally say, I love you to their kids, or give positive messages or whatever. And it's part culturally and part they need just to be reminded about how the importance of doing those things.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think that's in this book, I tried to kind of compartmentalize that, the things that we can say or do with our daughters or sons or wives is the first sort of bucket of connecting. And the second bucket is providing. It's like things we can do to achieve goals, earn money or save money. And the last category is living, the things that I think that's almost the one that I think a lot of guys give short shrift to. In that category, it's things like health, joy, and wisdom, the things we live for. And sort of included within that is self-care. I think it's funny. I think self-care among men has a PR problem. I think with a lot of guys, any concept that might involve a bath bomb is just not manly. So I'm not going to go there. But I think if we reframe that as, maintenance and repair, I think a lot of guys realize that, it would be silly for them to, buy a car and 2 years later be like, what do you mean it needs an oil change? Like, I don't have time to figure out where the smoke is coming from under the hood. I'm too busy. We get it with our car, but we're just a much more complicated machine. And if we think of, taking care of ourselves, our body, our soul, our mind as maintenance and repair, I think that reframes the issue in a way that allows us to have the capacity to be the father that we want to be, not only for our kids' sake and our partner's sake, but also for our own sake, and so that's some of the ideas I wanted to explore a little bit in here as well.
Yeah, so there is this there is this framework to what you're talking about. Let go over again what the three pillars of that are. So
Sure, yeah. It was the 3. So just to back up just one step further, to widen the aperture one step further, the sort of brand that I'm working with is called DadAthlon, as you mentioned, and that came from a while back. I ran a triathlon. Not a giant fancy one, as a teeny tiny little baby triathlon, but I always wanted to say I could do one, and I did one. And I was a runner growing up, so I knew how to run. I could ride a bike, but not competitively, and I was awful at swimming. So, but what I learned is there's these different muscle groups, and they're really different, and how you train them is meaningfully different. And as I reflected on that in the context of being a father, like it dawned on me, fatherhood's kind of the same way. You've got these different muscle groups. And so for me, there's a lot of ways you could sort of categorize them, I think. But for me, those muscle groups were connecting, in real ways there's our children, but, daughters are different than sons. Boys and girls are different, and how they connect with their father is and should be different. And then finally, your spouse or your wife or your significant other. And so those were the 3 sort of subcategories of connecting, which is the first event. And then the middle event is providing. And under providing, it's I've got 3 chapters, and they're execution, so goal setting, habits, things like that. And then 2 that are sort of financial related. One is dollars defense, which is protecting money going out the door. Things like budgeting, but like an easy, we've got a lot of dad hacks throughout the book. That's a term sometimes that can have a negative connotation, but the idea behind dad hacks is something whose usefulness is disproportionate to the effort. Small amount of effort, big bang for your buck. With dollars, there's defense, and there's also offense, which is like places where you got a bunch of stuff lying around the house. Hey, here's where you can sell that. And here's, probably how much you can expect, or here are some side hustle ideas. Here's some things to think about before you do any of that stuff, so that it's aligned with what your values are. So that's the middle category, the middle event of the triathlon for dads, the DadAthlon is providing. And then the final one, as I alluded to, is living, and the first part is health, mind, body, and soul, in terms of making sure that we are going to be here for as long as we can for our children, for our spouse, for ourselves. And then joy, because life is so, I think we go through the motions so much that sometimes just we forget to laugh and smile, create memories for our children, so give them something to kind of think back on. And then finally, wisdom. And this is where sort of faith kind of falls under the wisdom bucket, if there's a faith tradition that people operate in. And even if there's not, things about life and life lessons and things to pass on to your children. And so those were the 3 buckets for me. And again, it's different sort of muscle groups. And within each one, I try to explore concrete, practical steps that you can take if there's one of those that you think might be, out of whack, or which one is the most out of whack. You can kind of start there and do a couple of things to kind of bring it back into balance. So that was the thought process behind it.
So are there any exercises that talk about this balance? Because I think that those 3 are obviously very important, but how if you're out of whack with one, and how to repair it the most.
Yeah. I think the one of the hardest things, I think, that based on many of the dads who I've talked to, one of the things they struggle most with is exactly balance. And for me, part of the answer to that question, and I get into this a bit sort of in the execution chapter, is a lot of guys want to do it all at once, fix it all at once. But the 2 things that I learned is I don't really think that you can effectively multitask. You can keep some things on sort of maintenance, but then when you're focusing on something, that needs to be the thing that you're focusing on. I always crack up. I was in a meeting, I don't know, 5 or 6 years ago at work, and they were talking about, this year's priorities. And this year we're going to focus on this and that and those and this. And that's what we're going to focus on. And I couldn't help but think of The Princess Bride, where the guy's like, you keep using that word. I do not think it means what you think it means. We really need to focus on one thing at a time and make that the priority. So then the next question is, well, how do we figure out what that is? And that doesn't mean, ignore your wife and kids and ignore your job and just, start meditating. No, obviously, but it's the area where you want to build a habit. You want to install a habit that gets you kind of into balance. And where should that be? And that's why I created the Dad Quiz, which is a self-assessment where it's maybe 26, 27 questions. Most of them are, never, always, sometimes, frequently, that kind of a thing. It takes maybe 5 minutes to fill out. And it's a self-assessment that offers you perspective on which area you may be most likely to need to start with. And one of the perspectives that I include in the book and that I include in the Dad Quiz is, looking at your life from the perspective of 80, 85-year-old you. Look back at your life and what do you think you should have done differently? Or where do you think you should have spent more time? And also the other perspective is, now look at that same time frame, put yourself in the shoes of your adult children. What would they say you should have done more of? When it's today, when you're 50 something and your kids are little or whatever. So those are some perspectives that I hope help give people a framework through which to identify a good starting point. And then you fix that, and then you're a little bit more in balance. And then you do the next thing, and then you bring that into balance. So one at a time. I think guys want to do everything concurrently, but the key, I think, is to do them consecutively. Install one habit, get it fixed, then do the second habit, get it fixed, then do the third habit.
And you talk at all about things that you might have to give up through these parenting years. I mean, I think a lot of young parents, and certainly the cultural message before you're even a parent is like, this parenting thing is going to go on forever. And in the reality, it's a short period of time. It goes by in a flash. But the time of the real intense parenting, obviously, there's still a lot of parenting that goes on from adolescence on. But the time of the intense parenting is really from minus 9 months to about 12 years old. And then they start getting more and more independent. But during those first 12 years, you might have to give up a few things. I see the golf course behind you. And I'm thinking that was one of the things I gave up really early on. I just didn't have, public courses, 6 hours to play a round of golf on Saturdays was 6 hours that I either didn't have time to, rejuvenate or spend time with my wife or my kids. And that went.
Yeah. It's funny. Well, I guess at first I should probably say that this is a wall decal. It's not a golf course. I'm in the basement here.
That's not your house.
Yeah. So just a full disclosure, I finished a little office room in my basement here a while ago, and because there's no windows, I got a wall decal. But I feel a little bit ahead of my time because now that there's Zoom, there's all the fake, background.
Yeah, right, exactly.
I feel like I was the originator of the fake background.
The background.
In terms of, so I don't really go into that in the book itself. In the book, I think I focus more on, well, what can we be doing now to sort of like better, connect or achieve our goals. The perspective, I do some writing on the website, and I do some email newsletters from time to time as well. I think my perspective on that is, there are things that you give up, but there are things that people give up to do anything. You want to buy, a nice, BMW instead of an Accord. Well, there's a difference between what you're giving up for each of those things. It's not about giving it up. It's about what the trade-off is, as far as I can tell. And there are things that I and every dad and every parent has given up in order to be an effective parent. And the issue is it worth it? Would you do that trade over again? And I think most parents, most probably conscientious parents maybe, would probably say, it was worth it. And I liked golfing a lot when I was younger, and I haven't golfed a lot, since. But now, I've taken my daughter, she had some golf lessons not that long ago, and we go to the driving range from time to time. And my son had lessons last year. We were just talking, my 12-year-old son, and we were just talking the other day. Well, maybe we can go out on the course and do that, and sort of parlay it into not something that I've given up in order to do this parenting thing, but something I've traded off temporarily in order to do something that's more meaningful in my life and for the world. And at the end, when it comes together, I can have my cake and eat it too. I can then golf with my kids, or I can then do some of these things together with them as they grow. So I'm not sure if that's a helpful perspective. And that's not something I talk about in the book, but if I were talking to myself, when I was, when we had 3 kids who were under 3 and I didn't know my name for 6 months after the twins were born, it's hard. Yeah, of course it's hard, but it's worth it. And looking at it from the perspective of being beyond that phase, I would tell those people, stick with it. It's worth it, and it will come back. But just do it right and do it well, and be real.
Yeah. I think that when you have little kids, there are a lot of things that you might not be spending the entire day by yourself playing golf or with your friends, but there's so many other things that you can find that are your passions that you can share with kids, and they just eat it up until age 11 or 12. They want to do everything with dad. Everything dad wants to do, they're up for it. Trip to the store, whatever it is.
Paint the cabinets. I'll paint the cabinets.
Right.
Well, just to add one more thing to that though too, because I don't want to give the impression that what I'm suggesting is for that first 12 years of their life, parents and fathers should lead some sort of monastic, sense of self-denial at all. There are certain things that will need to be given up, and other things that will morph. And I think even throughout that whole process, just hearkening back to that sort of maintenance and repair, there are different things that we need to figure out. What do we do? What do we need to do? Maybe we don't do as much golf as we used to, but we do this, every 2 weeks instead of 3 times a week or something like that. Or maybe I do something else. You still need to find things that fill your own cup, that allow your spouse, your wife to fill her cup, like find time for your own self-care, as well as time to nurture your relationship with your wife as a couple, and things that you do on purpose as a family. Each of those 3 sort of constituents, yourself, the mother and father, and the family together, you have to do that. And that gets back to the intentionality. It has to be done on purpose. Because if you think you can put it on autopilot, the pushy world and jobs and recitals and all that kind of stuff, it's going to swallow up all of your time. And you'll just find yourself on repeat every day, and you'll wake up and the kids will be 30 and the cat's in the cradle and the silver spoon. Like, so.
Yeah. In my coaching with fathers, and I think this is an important thing because it's not as clear to younger dads, but in coaching fathers, we often spend a fair amount of time with values orientation and trying to determine what your personal values are. And one of the values that comes out usually in talking about it, but is probably not top of mind for the dad who's got a 2 or 3 year old, is this whole idea of legacy. And that's something that doesn't come around until you're getting to kids who are, our kids' age, where the kids are leaving home and you're starting to say, what did I leave with them? What did I impart? Did I make them happy, full, conscious people? And where did I fail? I can't go back and fix it now. But having that, not only the intentionality, but also having the intentionality in specific ways, if there are hundreds of values you potentially could have. And one of your hugest roles as a parent is developing those values within your kids. And I think legacy has got to be tops among those, because we are a stream. And that's the continuity that we hope to share. The only thing that will be here after we're long gone is whatever we've left to our kids and their kids.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I agree 100%. And I think one of the most important mechanisms that we have to impart a legacy onto our kids and to their kids is how we live, and I think kids are going to follow your example, not your words, and I think the better we do that, and that includes when we mess up, own that and be, I can't think of a better way to say this, because this is a passe way to use this, but sort of man up and take, which is the old way of using that term, and own it and apologize and explain what you did wrong, and be that example to them. Show them how to be right and show them how to be wrong, and show them how to learn. Show them how to fall and show them how to get up, and show them that with how we are with our behaviors. And at the end of the day, and part of that might be, the tangible things we leave behind. I talk in the book a lot about writing notes to your kids, and those are valuable in a way that I think probably a lot of guys just don't get how disproportionately valuable a handwritten note from their father may be, 7 years after he writes it, and they have no idea. But I think really just how we live our lives, how we talk to them, how we engage with their mother, are all the things that really are the intangible ingredients of a legacy that they will then use when they start their families and when they go on, and that just cascades, down through the generations. And I'll, if I can do that without messing that up, I would take that any day of the week, and twice on Sunday, in terms of what my legacy should be.
So you mentioned mom in the picture, your spouse, your partner. I'm working right now with positive intelligence and leading a group for fathers on positive intelligence is a framework for helping people find more positive ways to react to life's daily challenges. It's a way of creating more mental fitness. It's based on behavioral science and neurolinguistics and reprogramming the brain to change the way we react. And we're doing groups where I'm leading a group of men through this program. It's a 6-week program. And I've got a fellow coach, a woman, who's leading it with women. But we're talking quite a bit now about the importance of getting moms and dads on the same page. And this is a really common problem for a lot of couples. Luckily, I didn't suffer through a lot of this in my marriage without, having, bungled through it. But, you can have very different attitudes about a lot of parenting. Do you have any tips about that, about being in sync and having the communication with your partner about these different aspects? Because that's
I have a few things that I talk about in that chapter on connecting with mom, connecting with your significant other. I think the first thing, the most important thing, is to care, is to want to do that. And which sounds simple, but I think the way some guys talk, sometimes it's kind of macho. Sally's doing this. I don't know. She's going out with it. Whatever, tough guy. At the end of the day, you have to decide what works for you, and be in love with your wife and care what she wants to do. And so when she asks you a question, it's like, yeah, whatever, answer it, think about it. And when we talk, I think that's sort of the first thing I think is just make sure we care truly about prioritizing this relationship. Because at the end of the day, that relationship needs to be a priority, even above the relationship with the kids. The parents have to be together, for families where mom and dad are together, that's critical. And you can't, that's foundational. Then the kids can kind of come from there in terms of building and maintaining those relationships. But in terms of the specifics, one of the things I talk about, men and women, communicate in different ways has always been talked about. And, one tip I have in the book was to, when you're having a conversation, for example, is I have 3 little acronyms, FSA. So it's focus, shut up, and ask. And so the idea behind focus is, put the phone down, for the love of God. We talk about it with the kids, all the time, can I please have your undivided attention? So we get it. We get how disrespectful it can be when we're talking with someone and they're looking at a phone. When you're the person who has the phone, you don't get it until you're the person who you want someone else to listen to when they're holding the phone. So focus your undivided attention on what you're talking about. Then the hardest part for me is shut up. When you're speaking with your wife and she's speaking, let her speak. And I find myself sometimes jumping in, finishing sentences, trying to anticipate where she's going to go. In a warped way, I think that I'm demonstrating that I'm listening by, but I think just letting her speak and letting her finish, so that I can understand, and then ask a question, well, how did that make you feel? Or what do you think about that? Or, as opposed to, and the thing I think that a lot of guys want to go to, and I, again, have made this mistake 100,000 times, is jumping straight to the solution. You don't take your car to, I have a lot of car analogies, apparently. You don't take your car to the dealer and you're like, something's wrong with the car. And the dealer's like, yeah, no, I got it. Or the mechanic, I'll just fix the battery. Well, you didn't even find out what the problem was first. Again, we get it when it's with a car, but when we're having a conversation, let's just try to talk it through. And sometimes the issue itself is the fact that she just wants us to understand what the situation is, what she's going through. And I think a lot of guys don't get that. So I think for me, I still don't do this well, but I think that's a framework that I have been well served when I use it. Focus, stay quiet, and then ask questions. And they don't need to be super fantastic questions, just open-ended questions. Why? How did that make you feel? What did you think about that? That kind of thing. I'm not sure if that's where you're.
Well, that in itself is a really good tip, because like you say, men do have a tendency, when women do too. I mean, I know it's often pinned on men, but I think it's human nature. Is if somebody's in pain and it's somebody you love, you want to fix their problem and help them get away. And it's the same way with kids. I think the more you try to understand first and empathize with them and let them vent, that's part of being a good partner, a good parent. But it is something you need to remind yourself all the time. I fail at this every day. And it makes me shudder to think about how bad I am with it. So I think every kind of reminder that we can get, like if it's FSA that you need to remember in your mind, like your wife starts talking and you try to understand first and try to listen first and ask those open-ended questions. That goes a long way to building trust in a relationship.
Yeah. And speaking for myself, when there are tears involved, man, it is way harder, whether it's your wife or your kids. Like, fix this, stop tears. Like, there's this guttural, instinctual thing, make tears stop, make person feel better. And it really is hard to kind of step back and empathize. There can be comfort, but let's understand, like that is when I struggle the most. But I think it's important to just be mindful of that. And there's gonna be a time where then we'll switch to fix it mode. And that's good too. But they're two separate conversations, two separate modes. You shouldn't skip one to get to the other.
Yeah, dads of daughters know this far better than I think dads who only have boys, because there is nothing more heartbreaking to a dad than a little girl crying because she lost something or broke something, and you have it within your power to fix it. And I quite often did jump in and fix it, and now I maybe looking back, I wish I'd been a little bit less quick to do that in some situations. Obviously, you want to stop the tears as much as you can.
sometimes the hardest thing is to, one of the hardest things I've found as a father is sometimes you just need to let them work it out and let them fall and let them get up and let them learn from it and guide them and support them and comfort them. But sometimes they're the ones that have to do the work. And
because later on the problems get bigger.
Yeah.
Well, it's been a really pleasure talking to you. We obviously share a lot of the same philosophies about all this, and I'm looking forward to getting my results back from the quiz and seeing how I'm doing.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah.
So you can find Tim's website at DadAthlon.com, and he's going to put up a special page at DadAthlon.com/GreatDad, and that's appreciated. You can find more resources also on GreatDad.com, where we've got tons of stuff as well. And GreatDad.com/PQ is where you can read more descriptions about the positive intelligence program that I'm running. And I do a weekly webinar on that on Thursdays at 11 o'clock. And you can find more about that on that page. And that's free to join. And there'll be 3 tips of things that you can do immediately today to have a better home life. And part of it is part of what you're talking about is that listening. That's key to one of them.
Well, just to jump in too on that website with the DadAthlon.com/GreatDad, what I'll put on there is you can get for your audience, a free excerpt of the book. It'll be chapters 1, 2, and 3 in the book, which includes sort of an intro, how to use the book, and then the 2 chapters on children. So connecting with daughters and connecting with sons will be there for free, as well as a free movie finder, which is, I don't know about you or your audience, but sometimes on a Friday night, I spend 25 minutes scrolling through websites looking for the perfect movie. I put together a spreadsheet that has over 200 movies, and you can sort it or filter it by age, genre, gender, runtime, whether or not they're sequels, that kind of a thing. So that's just a useful thing. And then the mechanism by that would be you would go to that website and you would take the dad quiz, and that'll tell you where to start. Where's the first place to start? Which event, which category am I most out of whack in? Is it connecting? Is it providing? Is it living? And you'll get a customized report we've got charts and stuff on there as well. So hopefully that'll be something that your audience finds valuable.
Great. Well, thank you very much, Tim. And we'll look forward to looking further into your website.
Thanks, Paul. Really appreciate it. Thanks very much for having me.
Okay. Paul Beasley, GreatDad.com. See you next time.